Hello, everyone. I'm Amy Sloan, a homeschool mom of 5, and I am so excited to be here today with my friend Ann Karako. I chatted with Ann before on the Homeschool Conversations podcast all about homeschooling high school, but she recently has published a new book, Taming the Transcript, which I have read and enjoyed, and I knew that she would just have some really great real life perspective to share with us today. So, Anne, would you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, and your experience homeschooling?
Sure. Hi, and thanks for having me on. So yeah, I homeschooled all 5 of our kids from K through 12, and we actually just graduated the last one last week. So it doesn't feel real yet, and in all honesty, she's still got some work left to do. But they had the ceremony, and so she walked, which is what happens with college kids anyway, right? You walk before you actually have finished the credits. So that's the plan we're going on, but she assures me that within a couple of weeks she'll have it all taken care of. So yeah, and so all 5 of them graduated from the high school, and they are all, our homeschool high school, and they are all reasonably responsible adults who I actually like to hang out with. And that to me has always been the goal, is for us, our kids' character and personality was the goal. And so we feel like we were successful homeschoolers because they are good kids, good adults. Yeah, it's been a ride. We were very eclectic, just kind of took a lot of things, did co-op, not co-op, did textbooks, did videos, did online, did just about anything you could name. And it does strike me as kind of funny, and it was probably this way for me too, although I don't remember, that the first question that almost everybody asks when they're starting to think about homeschooling high school, they may have a kid who's like 10 years old. That's their oldest kid. He's 10 years old, and they're thinking about homeschooling high school, and their very first question is almost always, but what about transcripts? And I find that kind of funny, just because you don't need the transcript until literally like junior or senior year of high school in most cases, but that's always the first question. So yeah, I'm happy to talk with you about all of that today.
Yeah, I think I can't be alone. I mean, even as a second generation homeschooler, I graduated from homeschool. I had a transcript, I got in college, it was all fine. And yet at the same time, as a parent myself, there's all that pressure of like, oh no, I don't want to let my kids down. And I've had a few of my own little transcript meltdown moments. And
Uh-oh.
so that's one of the reasons why I appreciate you and just your real life, down to earth approach to this. Like, it's not anything you have to freak out about. It's really a lot simpler than sometimes we work it up to be in our head. And I guess that's kind of one of the questions I wanted to ask you, is just as you think about your experience teaching homeschool, high school in particular, were there any things that as you thought about high school that you, looking back now, realized you didn't really need to worry about, or you wish you had kind of figured out sooner?
Yeah. And, just kind of first, as some background, I feel like when you talk about we make these things out to be more difficult in our heads than they need to be. I mean, I did that too, right? I don't know that I necessarily blame myself or that you need to blame yourself. I feel like there's a lot of misinformation out there. And there's a lot of people that want to give you the long list of shoulds. You should do this and you must do that. Or, if you don't do this, then you're selling your kids short, or you're not doing a good job, or whatever. And they pile a lot of these expectations on that may have been great for them, but aren't necessarily great for us. But yet we feel like we're supposed to do them. And transcripts can come under that heading, and homeschooling high school in general. So many people are putting all these things out there that you should do if you want to make sure your kid gets into college, dual enrollment, make sure they volunteer a lot of hours, make sure they have a lot of extracurriculars, or maybe some AP courses or some honors courses, all this stuff. And none of that is necessary. And so when it comes to what do I wish I had figured out, I think probably it's one of those things that on one side it's really good, and on the other side there are some downfalls, and I don't think I recognize the downfalls like I kind of wish I had. So I'm very much a proponent of independent learning in high school. And in fact, I started that with my kids even way before high school. I mean, and you can probably relate. 5 kids, right? And mine were all born within 8.5 years of each other. So when the oldest was 8.5, the youngest was born. And so that means if there was a time period, for instance, where I had a 3rd grader, a 1st grader, a kindergartner, a 3-year-old boy, and a nursing infant. And that makes for a very busy day. And so the 3rd grader learned to do math on her own in 3rd grade, from her little Abeka workbook or whatever. But even so, I started her independent learning then, just because I couldn't sit down with every kid, every subject. And so definitely by high school age, I really strongly recommend that kids are doing a lot of work on their own, if only because it does prepare them for what comes next. Whether it's college or a career, they're going to need to learn on their own. The college professor doesn't take their hand and walk them through the semester. He hands them a syllabus at the beginning. It's their responsibility to make sure everything gets done. And so I am a huge proponent of independent learning in high school, but I do feel like maybe on the opposite side of that I let my kids do, that I wasn't as involved as I should have been in their day-to-day. In the sense of, I was kind of the taskmaster, although that's kind of a hard term. I kind of supervise, okay, what you doing today, and do you need me? But it wasn't as relational, if you will. Like, that's one of the reasons I think morning time would be a really cool thing, even through the high school years, but we never got into that habit. And sometimes I think that, yeah, the independent learning is great, but on the other side, balance that with more relational homeschooling in the ways that it's possible, like through morning time, or maybe reserve history to be something that is done together, just some way to balance them both so that your kid isn't just basically on their own all day with you checking in every now and again, so yeah. I guess I always answer longly, and I apologize for that.
No, that's okay. I love it. And I can relate to what you're saying. My oldest is a rising junior, which blows my mind. And my youngest is a rising 1st grader. So he just finished kindergarten. Wow. So we've got that big range. And same thing. Also, you also have to think about personalities. It may be that my oldest is not quite one who wants to sit and discuss, deep thoughts and emotions at a given moment. But that exact thing of kind of like making morning time something that you don't get to get out of just because you're a teenager, most of the time. There's obviously, I want to be loving and kind and flexible when necessary. But in general, it's still something that we're all going to do together. And I flex the amount of time that I require for those older kids. So the time they're there is actually much shorter than it used to be. But there's still that time, that priority where they know, no, you're still part of this whole family and we all are doing this together. I think that's been really helpful. Even as there's so much independence, I'm thankful to see my older kids really taking on responsibility, especially with their outsourced classes and not having to like, okay, have you done your work? Have you done your work? Have you done your work? But yeah, it's a challenge. Well, it's kind of shifting gears a little bit more directed from homeschooling high school in general to this issue of transcripts, since this is your newest book and what I want to talk about today. Like, I would love to hear, what are some of the assumptions you think that are bad assumptions people make when they think about crafting their homeschool transcript?
Yeah, that's a long list. I think in general, just kind of big picture, they think it needs to be a lot more complicated than it is. They think it needs to have a lot more information on there than it really does. So, for example, people want to add test scores onto the transcript, like, your ACT or SAT or CLT test scores. Or they want to add, the kids' work experience or extracurricular activities or volunteering hours onto the transcript. And none of that is necessary. Or they want to add course descriptions onto the transcript.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. Like, I don't think so.
Yeah, no. When you consider just thinking reasonably in your head about a public school transcript, the public school doesn't keep track of all the extracurricular activities that each student is involved in order to put those on a public school transcript. So why do we as homeschoolers think we need to do that? Most of those extra types of information, there's a place to put that on the college application anyway. So to put it on a transcript would be redundant, but it's absolutely not necessary. A transcript is grades, courses, and credits earned, and that's it. I mean, and obviously identifying information, right? And then the signature of whoever's certifying it. But that's all that a transcript is. So many people come into it with an assumption that it needs to be a lot more than that, and it just doesn't. Oh, one more thing that people tend to get kind of mixed up on is they think that a transcript and a diploma are interchangeable terms, and they're not. So a diploma is a completely separate thing. A transcript is the document that gets sent to colleges that shows what the kids' grades have been. The diploma is just the certificate, I shouldn't say just, it is the certificate that you give when they graduate. Rats, until last week I had my daughter sitting here and I could have showed it to you, but it's the one that says, hey, this person completed this course of study at this school, and it's usually comes in a nice little folder and you can frame it if you want and put it on the wall, but it does not get sent to colleges, and it and the transcript are two different things. And of course I have, blog posts about this stuff too. So
yes. Yeah. And one thing I hear too is people want to know, well, how do I make it like an official transcript? Do I have to go get it like notarized, or does somebody else have to look over the transcript?
Great question. And nope. So strangely enough, official is just a word you put at the top. The difference, as I understand it, between an official and an unofficial is that an unofficial is one that maybe the student has access to, probably doesn't have a signature, and it's just a listing. Whereas the official transcript literally just put the word official at the top, make sure it's got a signature, send it off, you're good to go. When we're talking about institutions, if, like, for instance, if the kid took some classes at the public school, or if you ever are needing to send your college transcript off for like employment or whatever, you would request it from the college, and the college would send it directly to wherever it was going. That would be official because you wouldn't have access to it. But you can still like go to the administrator at the college and say, hey, can I have a copy of my transcript? That's an unofficial copy, whatever you get for yourself. But the official goes straight from the office to the place. So then in our terms, we're the office. So it's going to go straight from us to the place. We're going to put official, we're going to sign our name, and that makes it official.
Yeah. We had to do that actually last year, and my son was doing some dual enrollment. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to put together this transcript. I'm like going through your whole website, like, okay, calm down, you're going to be fine. But yeah, they just wanted to see it signed. Very simple. Just, we just scanned it in our little home printer, and it turned it into a PDF and with the signatures on there. And that was all that mattered. Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Well, another thing I hear kind of people throwing around is like, you've got to really make your transcript stand out. Like, make sure your kid looks amazing. So what do you say to that kind of question?
So yeah, it is out there. That's one of those things where I feel like we're being sold a bill of goods, where people are setting up these expectations. These experts are setting up these expectations in us. Yes, transcript must make your kids stand out. So you have to make it sparkle, or you have to add all these things, or even when it comes down to like how you name courses is supposed to really make a difference in how your kid looks to these colleges. And the reality is, So, and it may have been that way in the past. I'm not denying that it's possible it was that way in the past, but I don't believe it is now, strictly because I've sent 5 kids worth of applications and transcripts to colleges, and they've all gotten accepted almost everywhere they applied. And the only one rejection that we got was because my oldest was applying for a music department at a pretty high-powered school, and it was her music that was not up to what their snuff was going to be. No, the transcript had absolutely nothing to do with it. So if we can like set that one aside as not really meeting, the qualifications that we're looking for. Every single place other than that one that my kids applied with our very simple, non-sparkly transcript, they got accepted and they got scholarships for. Again, when you consider that the colleges are getting a gazillion applications all the time from both public school kids and homeschool kids, they have a system for how they're looking at these transcripts. And most of what they're looking for is just to make sure that your kid meets their minimum admissions requirements. Colleges have, coursework that they want the kid to have done in high school. So many credits of language arts, so many credits of history, so many credits of science, so many credits of math. Some ask for some foreign language as well. They're looking to see if that was done. And so they're not necessarily looking to see what the name of the course is as to whether it's a history course or a science course or a math course. So there's that. So literally my kids' English for 9th and 10th grade was English 9 and English 10. And there was no description of that. It was just, this is what I call it because it had what I thought an English class should have, and that's good enough. So you could do the same thing, and then violin was violin 1, 2, 3, and 4. I mean, there was no, introduction to the classical masters, or I don't know, just picking that up off the top of my head. They don't have to be, the transcript alone is not what's going to make your kid sparkle or shine. The transcript is literally the courses they took, the credits they earned, the grades they got. And they don't have to be these amazing course titles. It's more just data for the school, as far as what is the kid's GPA, did they finish those requirements? And public school kids are not trying to shine with their transcript. And then, see, like I said, I always answer quite long, but what you're bringing into this is the comparison of homeschoolers to public schoolers. And how, for some reason, we think we have to actually outshine the public schoolers. We have to somehow validate our homeschool education for our kids, rather than being willing to be compared the same way. We have this burden, and I do feel like it's been placed upon us to make our kids look better. And you know what? The colleges know what they're looking for, and your kid either meets it or he doesn't. And again, there's the whole rest of the application that can list all the extracurriculars, that can list, the place for if there's an essay, an admissions essay to be done, your kid can shine in the essay just like every other kid out there is trying to shine through the essay. Your kid can shine in many other ways on that application. The transcript doesn't have to be the way that happens. The transcript is really a record of data. That's really more the way to look at it.
I love that. And I think that it often goes back to like an identity question in our own minds as moms. It's something I talk a lot about at Humility and Doxology. When I talked to Missy Andrews, one of my heroes from Center for Lit, this is something that she really brought up, is how we change our identity to somehow be wrapped up in what our children do. And it becomes this performancism. That's what Missy calls it. Somehow if they get an A, we get an A. Like their achievement becomes our sort of pat on the back, or like vindicates what we've done. Or actually even more than what we've done, really who we are. And that's really dangerous for us. It's dangerous for our relationship with our kids. And it's really a burden that they shouldn't have to bear and that we shouldn't have to bear. So just to kind of also ask ourselves, I guess, those harder questions, like, why are we so worried about what the admissions person at this random place cares about our transcript? Like, yes, we want to do it well and excellently and submit a nice transcript. But what are we really worried about? Are we really worried about whether our kid's going to get into college, or are we worried about how it's going to reflect on who we are? And if that's really what's going on, then we probably need to repent of that and change our mindset.
I agree wholeheartedly, which is why I, not too many months ago, changed the tagline on my website. So I don't even remember what it said before, but now it says homeschooling high school for real people. because I do feel like I want to get that voice out there, that message out there, that it's okay to be ordinary. We are real, we don't, just because we're homeschoolers doesn't mean we surpass the rest of the world in everything, nor should we try to. And there's a lot of kids out there who aren't, top tier school material, but for some reason we keep thinking that's what we need to be preparing our kids for, and that's what our kids need to look like. And you probably know that, especially when you do hit the teen years. All these ideas that you had for how your kid was going to turn out, and where they were going to excel and where they weren't, can sometimes get completely the other way around. Our kids change so much between when they're small to when they are in high school. And it's actually really fun to watch as their personalities come out and they do discover what their strengths and weaknesses are, perhaps a little bit better. If you can look at it that way as, wow, this is, the butterfly coming out of this kind of mundane little chrysalis or whatever they call that. I forget, I'm not a nature study guru, but that's pretty mundane looking. But then when the butterfly with all its many colors comes out, it's almost like as our teens grow through the high school years, that's what we're seeing happen. And if we can see that as a joy and as God's handiwork, and stop having all these expectations of what we think they should be or what they should look like, as far as, what the transcript is supposed to look like all A's is another one of those huge homeschool myths out there. Oh, my kid has to have all A's on his transcript or he won't get in, or he won't get a scholarship. And it's not just about getting into college. I get that people are looking to get scholarships from this transcript. The thing is, the transcript is usually a couple steps down on the list as far as what colleges are looking at to give scholarships. I mean, yes, the GPA is probably part of it, but again, just the GPA, not necessarily, in fact, hardly ever, I would think, what the course titles are, and whether they ever got a B or whatever. One of my kids with the lowest GPAs, he had a 3.5. And that's only because I rounded up from a 3.47. And he got a scholarship, like a full tuition scholarship to a junior college. So you don't have to have a 4.0 to get a scholarship at the right opportunity. And that's something else I wanted to bring up, is that we are real people. We are kind of, most of us anyway. And so then what type of college are you looking at that you feel like you have to make your kids look so amazing, so much really not like who they are when you are realistic about it? Are you aiming too high? Are you trying to use your kids' transcript and whatever college they get into to validate what you've been doing? Or are you seeking the best fit for them? Yeah. And usually where they're going to get the most money is where they look really good. So case in point, my son with the 3.5, there are many schools out there that would not have given him any money for a 3.5. But at this junior college, that 3.5 looks great, and they were willing to give him the money. So, I mean, there were a couple other hoops to jump through for that particular scholarship, but it still remains that he got it with a 3.5 GPA. So all that to say, I kind of forgot where I started on that. Just it's not about, as you said, it's not about who we want to feel like or who we want our kids to look like so that we will feel like something. It's about what is the best for them. And the best for them is to be realistic and honest on that transcript, and find them a place where that's going to look good.
Yeah, definitely. Well, anyone who's listening who has a high schooler or is thinking about high school, I definitely recommend you grabbing Taming the Transcript, Ann's newest book. She has many others as well. So if you want to tell us, why should you not buy this book? Who is this book not for? And then who is it for?
That's a good question. So the book is not for, in fact, I say this in the book is not for people who have a 10-year-old and aren't ready to make the transcript. This book is a how-to, step-by-step through the process of actually creating a transcript. So it is for kids, moms whose kids are already in high school. Maybe they have to put a transcript together to apply for a dual enrollment class, or maybe it's time for college applications. That's who this is for. Now, if you just want to have it on your, shelf to have for later, that's fine, but be aware that it's not going to help you if you're not ready to actually create the transcript.
And where can people find you all around the internet?
So I'm at annieandeverything.com. And I also have a podcast called It's Not That Hard to Homeschool High School. And there's also a Facebook group of the same name, It's Not That Hard to Homeschool High School. So any of those places, I would say website first, because on the website you can find the podcast. The Facebook group is great. It's very large. It's very eclectic. So you're going to get a lot of different answers there, and not all of them, like we, you have to have the disclaimer in the group. Not all of, of the comments represent, the administration or whatever. And so not all of them are going to represent the idea that, no, you don't have to do all these things. Many people in there are like, oh, you got to do this, you got to do that. And I often have to go in and say, oh, but really, that's not the case. And let's ease our minds here. Let's take deep breaths, which is why I call it, It's Not That Hard to Homeschool High School. Because it, as I've started to say at the end of every podcast, it may not always be easy to homeschool high school, but it doesn't have to be that hard. And it becomes that hard when we listen to all the shoulds out there and try to apply them to ourselves when they don't fit our situation. If they work, if they fit your situation, great, but they're not shoulds, they're want tos. And we need to keep that in mind. So.
Fabulous. And I will have links to all that in the comments and the show notes. And I'll just make a personal comment that your emails are one of my favorite subscriptions. So, we all have those emails that come in a lot and we're just like, delete, 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 delete. But we don't really want to unsubscribe. We just don't have time to read them. But I always love reading your emails. I love your writer's voice and your authenticity. So if anyone is homeschooling or thinking about homeschooling a high schooler, I would also recommend that they get on your email list. So
awesome.
Thanks, Ann, for being with us today. This is really fun.
You bet. It's been fun for me too. Thanks for having me.